Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined, as always, for our weekly Zeise is Right video by Paul Zeise of the Post-Gazette. Paul is in transit, pulling over to talk a little sports. So, Paul, how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually in the parking lot at my doctor's office, so I'm not dangerously on the side of the road. I'm not. It's just because of a timing thing. We decided that I would do it here instead of driving to the office because we needed to get it. We needed to knock it out. So this is fine.
Yeah, it works. It works. So, Paul, we're going to get into some of the Russell Wilson talk that has exploded seemingly out of nowhere in the last couple of days. We're going to talk about the Steelers' offensive coordinator search, the ongoing, candidates that we keep hearing about. Talk a little bit more about quarterbacks. Then we got some Pirates, Penguins, and college basketball topics that hopefully we'll have time to get into. Before we do, just want to thank our primary sponsor for this episode and every episode of the Zeise is Right show here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, Joe Starkey wrote the column today saying the Steelers should get Russell Wilson if they have the chance, if they can get him on the cheap. Ed Bouchette, Peter King are among those who floated the suggestion that they could get Russell Wilson. There's a big difference in those two words, but I just want to get your reaction to all of it and whether he is someone who interests you in the Steelers quarterback conversation.
Well, no, he doesn't. And I'll tell you why. I really think that they've got to figure out what they have with Kenny Pickett. And I feel like if you bring in a new offensive coordinator, you give Kenny Pickett the entire offseason to play, and to run the offense and to be with the ones or whatever. I'll be honest with you. I feel like he's going to be able to be good enough that that they don't need to invest in a guy like Russell Wilson. I would be much more interested in a guy like Jacoby Brissett, for instance. Somebody who has proven, you know what, and at times he can win games if he needs to win games, if you need to put him in there so that if Kenny Pickett goes bad after 4 weeks or 5 weeks, okay, you finish the season with a guy like Jacoby Brissett. If your defense is good enough and your running game is still pretty good, you could still win enough games to get to the playoffs. And then, of course, you obviously have to then go address the quarterback spot, in the offseason. If you bring in Russell Wilson, he's your starter, period. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. He's your starter. He's the guy that you're going to have to give, full commitment to. And I don't know that I necessarily think that's what you want to do because at that point, you're basically essentially giving up on Kenny Pickett. I don't understand why, if the Steelers have made it so clear that Kenny Pickett is going to be their guy next year, why everybody's trying to come up with an alternate plan that just isn't going to be the deal. It's not going to be somebody that they're going to bring in like that. I can't believe for 1 second that that's what they're going to do. I can't, because I feel like it's one of those situations, Adam, where they are pretty much telegraphing their commitment to Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I mean, I get a similar vibe, Paul. I think the suggestion is that Russell Wilson would be the backup and would be the guy you can plug in if Kenny Pickett struggles and has a lot of experience. I don't know if I believe that he would willingly take that role unless truly no one else wanted him, A. And B, I think it would be a really difficult spot to put Kenny Pickett in, just in terms of having someone so proven, a Super Bowl winner, a known commodity that I think a segment of the fan base is going to be screaming for almost immediately, unless Kenny Pickett's throwing for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. I don't like to use the phrase looking over his shoulder. I think that's too big a name to put behind Kenny Pickett on the depth chart, even if you could get Russell Wilson to come in here with the, understanding at the beginning that he'd be the backup to start.
Yeah, I just don't think that's the other point. You're not bringing him here. If you're bringing him here, he's your starter. You've made it very clear that the competition is over. You've made it very clear that he's going to be your starter. He's your guy. And so there's no reason in the world I think, at least this is just me, there's no reason in the world to think that you could bring him here and say, oh, well, you're going to be a backup and you can mop up for Kenny Pickett. He's not going to do that. He's not going to want to do that. And frankly, you're not going to pay him to do that. So to me, when I hear about quarterbacks they're going to bring in, and I hear some of these big names even Kirk Cousins, how much do you think he's going to cost? You're not going to bring him in here if he's not going to be your starter. And I know he got hurt, and I know all this other stuff. He's a guy who has actually been a starter for 12 years in this league, has won a lot of games, is considered one of the, what would you say, top 12, 13 quarterbacks in the NFL, somewhere in that neighborhood probably. You're not bringing that guy here to be a backup. So to me, the conversation should be more about the Jacoby Brissett type guy that's out there. And there are a number of those guys around the league. And obviously you can say, well, they tried to do that with Mitch Trubisky. Well, obviously, Jacoby Brissett, to me at least, when he's played, has been better than what we saw from Mitch Trubisky. And I think you bring a guy like that in because ultimately, I'm also of the opinion, Adam, that you can't have Mason Rudolph still hanging around. You just can't. The guy came in, won 3 games and, played in the playoffs, played 4 games, was 3-1. They averaged, 24 points a game in his 4 games. You know what I mean? It seems like the locker room, the guys in the locker room like him and want him to be the starter. You can't thrust that upon, you can't thrust that upon Kenny Pickett or whatever. And then expect him to thrive in an environment where every time he doesn't do well or whatever, people are going to be saying, well, wait a minute, what about this other guy over here that, was the starter, who should be the starter? And you risk dividing your locker room. To me, if you're going to be committed to Kenny Pickett, be committed to Kenny Pickett and do it in a way that you're going to basically going to say, here's our plan, Kenny. You're our guy. This is your year. Let's go full force ahead and see what happens.
Do you even think Russell Wilson has anything left, Paul? Because I'm of the opinion that no, A, and then B, even if he does, he's not a solution to the problem for anything past 2024. And I don't know if the team's good enough to warrant, the risk. It's you have so much more of an investment in Kenny Pickett. And to me, that's a big part of this. If you could get a reasonably young guy to come in here and compete with Kenny Pickett that had, some veteran experience, a Justin Fields comes to mind. If you could get him, I think I could live with that. I don't really find, going to be 36-year-old guy to be a solution to your big picture problem. And if he's not, then why would you not want to see what you have in Kenny Pickett and make him kind of sink or swim so you go into next offseason knowing exactly what you need?
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's exactly what I've said. I really believe that. You have to know what you have at the end of this season with Kenny Pickett. And I don't believe that they know what they have, really. I think they kind of have an idea what they have, but I don't think they really know what they have. So to me, you know what? That's what when you pick somebody in the first round, that's what you're trying to do is, do we have a first rounder here or do we have a guy who's a bust? And if we do, then we need to know that by the end of this season. So to me, you're not throwing the season away if you go and you sign somebody like a Jacoby Brissett or who else is out. There's some other guys that are out there that, are reasonably good backup quarterbacks that have proven they can win a little bit when they play. Go find one of those guys, trade for them, sign them, whatever. But to me, it's got to be you're fully committed to Kenny Pickett being your quarterback next year.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit, though, Paul, in the sense of Mason Rudolph, because I do think he checks the veteran backup option. I think he is that. And I think if his name was John Smith and not Mason Rudolph, who would just won 4 games and seems to have the support in the locker room, that he would be a great option for the Steelers. Is that what it comes down to for you, Paul? It's not just the guy on the football card. It's that he could create a little bit of friction in the locker room.
Yeah, that's the big thing. That's the thing to me, Adam. 100% is that you've got a guy it could be a divided locker room. if Kenny Pickett struggles a little bit or he's not, you know what I mean? And people are going to, people are, especially some of the veterans on that team and stuff, they start saying, hey, wait a minute. We have a guy on this team that's proven he can win games. Why are we so committed to this? You know, so, I mean, there's going to be some growing pains early in the season. What I would not want to see is a situation where they have not, you know, really exhausted every opportunity for Kenny Pickett to be really good. That's what I want to see, and I don't know that they've done that yet.
Paul, switching topics, the first couple names in the offensive coordinator search came out this week. Zach Robinson of the Rams and Cliff Kingsbury, formerly of the Cardinals. Do either of those guys interest you? And are there any other names that you think should be on the list that we haven't necessarily heard of being in the mix yet?
Well, I mean, as Zach Robinson is a guy, obviously, that I think people are excited about because of his tree. But he doesn't really fit the profile, right? To my knowledge, he hasn't called offensive plays, right?
No, he's just the passing game coordinator.
Right.
And Mike Tomlin did say he wanted someone who's done the job before. Right. So, but I mean, if they're interviewing him, that signals some level of interest. Do you think that's just a nod to, like, we're at least going to listen to someone from those trees, those coaching trees?
I mean, I think they're just trying to do their due diligence. One of the things that probably has happened in the past is it feels like all of their searches have been very, very uninspired, you know, very much just, hey, you know, we're going to interview 2 or 3 guys, but we're going to promote this guy, or we're going to hire a guy that already has some sort of a tie here in some ways. And I think that's the key to me. And really, it 100% is, at least now it feels like they are casting a wider net and at least kicking the tires on some of these guys. Now, Cliff Kingsbury, it's funny to me. One of the things that I've heard people say, well, he had a losing record at Texas Tech when he had Mahomes. That is so irrelevant to me. I can't even tell you how irrelevant that is. You know what I mean? First of all, you're at Texas Tech. Let's face that. Not that people haven't had some success there, but you're at Texas Tech. Secondly, you're the head coach, which means you have a hand in the defense as well. In this case, guess what? He's just going to call plays. Now, do I think he's the right fit for the Steelers? I just don't know. I don't know, you know, if he's this quarterback whisperer that everybody wants to make him out to be. And that's really at the heart of what all of these discussions are is, okay, you know, we need a quarterback guru. We need a quarterback whisperer. We need somebody who's, you know, young and part of one of these trees. So I guess if they hired him, it wouldn't move me one way or the other. I tend to think, Adam, we haven't heard the name yet. I tend to think that they're going to probably hire somebody who is experienced, who's an older guy, you know, who's been around the league and maybe has had a lot of success with quarterbacks or whatever. I just have a feeling that that's probably going to happen. Like, these first couple of interviews are more just sort of kicking the tires on some younger guys and trying to cast a wider net than they have in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And here's the thing, Paul. If Cliff Kingsbury starts scoring a ton of points here and the Steelers give up another, 35 points and lose in the first round of the playoffs, do you know who they're going to be screaming to be the head coach? It's going to be Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think Mike Tomlin's bringing in a guy who could reasonably be seen as an alternative to him on his staff. The name I'm looking at, Paul, is Darrell Bevell. I think he checks a lot of the boxes. He's on the Mike McDaniel tree to the extent that exists. You know, he's had, you know, success as a play caller. I think he fits the perfect mold of what Mike Tomlin's looking for. So that's the name that I'm looking for, that we have not. We've heard people talk about it, but we haven't heard him directly connected yet. That's what I'm looking for.
How about this one?
I'll go for it.
How about this one? They stall and wait and stall and wait, and all the other head coaching jobs get filled, and then they make a real legitimate run at Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah, he's a name I would be, you know, interested into. And I think I said it, I don't know if it was on this show or another show, but he's got that kind of hard-ass reputation that I think people would love.
Right. And my thing is, as far as I can tell, he's interviewed for the Washington job, and that's it. It's not. I haven't heard his name really mentioned prominently in any of these other jobs. So it looks like the leader in Seattle is Mike Vrabel. That's one less job that might be open. I don't know what's going on with the Chargers and the Falcons, but one of them seems like they're going to end up with Harbaugh, right? There's just not many spots that are going to be available for him. And if he doesn't have a head coaching job, Mike Tomlin is the kind of guy that's got the kind of cachet, that's kind of guy, that could call him up and say, listen, if you come here, I'll really help you get to where you want to go. We'll call you the senior advisor or senior associate coach or something like that. And you can be our offensive coordinator. I'll let you run the offense. And, it'll probably be one or two more years, you'll be a head coach.
Yeah, so, that's an option I'd love to see them investigate. Paul, last Steelers topic before we move on to some other Pittsburgh sports topics. Cam Heyward said on his podcast he's not taking a pay cut to stay in Pittsburgh. Do you think he's going to get the choice? I kind of feel like if he forces the Steelers' hand, they're going to cut him, and then where else is he going to go? Do you see that as a realistic outcome for him, where he takes the same cap hit going into 2024 and remains with the Steelers?
No, I think what they'll do is restructure, right? Because when they restructure deals like that for guys that are at the end, it's essentially a pay cut because they know he's not. This is it. This is his last year, right? So they'll bring him in. They'll say, we're going to restructure your deal this way. Who did they do that with? They did that, I think, a little bit. I think they did that with Ben. I think Ben actually had another year on his deal. But the way that it was restructured, right, there wasn't really that big cap hit or whatever. I think what they'll do is they'll restructure it. They'll tell them, listen, we're going to pay you X, over the course of this 2 or 3 years. And then at the end of the year, they're going to cut them. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, I can see that. Paul, we're going to move on to talking a little bit about the Pirates. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor, Pitt Johnstown. It's a Pitt quality education, up close and personal learning, a top-ranked Northeast Public College by U.S. News and World Report. Generous scholarships and financial aid are available. Located on 655 picturesque acres, easy access to the city center, shopping and dining, vibrant campus life with an active D2 athlete community. Check out Pitt Johnstown. Paul, reaction to the Aroldis Chapman deal for the Pirates. They bring in a pretty decorated reliever for $10.5 million. I think a lot of people were shocked. Jason Mackey, our Pirates insider, seems pretty confident that this has got to be the first leg of a bigger move where either you deal some relievers to get a starting pitcher, or you're acquiring a starting pitcher at a very cost-controlled number. So if you average it out across a couple players, they end up being two pretty solid pieces for $10.5 million. What's your reaction? What's your read?
Well, again, if it's legitimately part of a larger deal, if there's more coming down the pike, then I will have to withhold my judgment until I see what it all looks like at the end. If it's not, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's really idiotic because they have bigger needs than reliever. And we all want them to spend money, right? And ideally, this would be part of, we're going to spend $10.5 million on this guy, but we're going to spend $15-16 million on a starting pitcher. We're going to spend, $8 or $9 or $10 million on a corner outfielder. We're going to do that. Do you know how that's not how they operate? So if I'm looking at it in a vacuum and this was their big splash move to add payroll, it makes no sense to me because they don't have really that big of a need for what he's going to bring. So I guess I got to say, as of right now, I'm underwhelmed by it. But I'm very open-minded to the point that they might be able to flip it and to turn it into something else. And if they do that, then I'll say, yeah, what a great move.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was saying this with Jason yesterday. We did a quick video on it. If you can have him and you can possibly shorten the game to 6 innings, Paul, and go Holderman, Chapman, Bednar in some order, I think that's great. If you end up trading Bednar and you have a 1-year option in Chapman, I don't love that unless you get a really good cost-controlled starting pitcher. Or, the starting pitcher thing is the big thing for me. And there's been so many deals that have been signed that the Pirates could have made for this amount of money. And I guess that's the part that I get hung up on is who is this guy that they're going to trade for, that it's taken them so long to get to this point that they've also allowed plenty of pretty solid guys go in a similar price range. I guess that's where I have a level of skepticism about what the next move really could be. I think it could be a quote unquote young starter. I don't know how proven that starter is going to be. I think that's my kind of fear here, Paul, is I can exactly what you said. If you get that proven frontline guy and you average it out and, he's making like $3 or $4 million and Chapman's making 10.5 and they average out to 7 and you have those two pieces in place. Great. I just feel like that deal would have happened already if it was going to, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the point of it? What's the point of doing it this way? Like, what's the point of, unless you already have a deal worked out, what's the point of, okay, we're going to sign this guy who's an asset or whatever. And then just, as you said, how many pitchers have signed? Free agents have already signed that the Pirates could have made deals with. And I'll give you another one that the first baseman that just signed, was it the Brewers that just signed him?
That was the next thing on my list, Paul. I was going to ask you what it was. Reese Hoskins signs with the Brewers.
Reese Hoskins for what was it?
I think it's $34 million across 3 years. It's a significant contract, but listen, they picked him up because they didn't want Rowdy Tellez, and the Pirates have Rowdy Tellez. And people have already made that connection on Twitter and said the Pirates are basically getting the Brewers scraps. Is there any way else to look at this, Paul?
Yeah, I saw that the other day, and I'm thinking to myself, what is it, $34 million over 3 years, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? I mean, we're talking about $11-12 million a year, whatever, $11.5 million a year. That right there would have been a better use of the money they signed Chapman with. So that's the thing that's frustrating, is there's so much of that goes on. That's the kind of guy, honestly, that they should have signed. Somebody that is actually going to make them better at a place that they need to be made better. And you bring him in, and guess what? Now you can use Connor Joe in the outfield a little bit more, whatever you're going to do with him, right? Even at DH some. Instead of this, platoon thing you're going to do with him at first base when he's not a first baseman.
Paul, they just seem to hate multi-year deals. I mean, there is no other way for me to interpret how this offseason compared, and even last offseason, when you're going in with some expectation that they're going to be a little bit better, they just seem like Ben Cherington seems to think that the offseason is for sorting out your own guys, finding the holes for your own guys, and then filling them in with these 1-year, flyers, and that's going to be good enough. I don't know if that's how modern baseball works, and I'm not expecting them to bring in 6 or 7 guys on multi-year deals, Paul. They just seem terrified to do even one, and the chance it could be a flop.
Right. There's no question. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Adam. None of what they have done. There's some of it that I can say, well, yeah, that'll make them a little better, and they signed a couple of pitchers or whatever, but they haven't done what they needed to do in order to address some of the biggest issues they still have. And so now, as I wrote in my one column, now it's basically, they're back to hope is a method, and hoping that, Connor Joe and Rowdy Tellez can hit 40 home runs together, and hoping that O'Neal Cruz can stay healthy and is going to take the next step as a hitter, and hoping that Brian Hayes continues to progress and hit more home runs. Hoping that Quinn Priester and some of these guys that they have that we've seen that we are all pretty clear that they're not good enough. Hoping that a couple of those guys, that's what they're looking at right now. I don't understand what the plan is.
Well, I'll just repeat my theory, Paul. I think that the plan is to try to get to like 84 wins and Diamondbacks your way to a World Series. And I don't think there's a ton of interest in building a high upside team. I don't see it. I don't see where this is going unless a ton of prospects should start showing a ton of progress over the next year. It just seems like the goal is to be kind of what the Steelers are, right? Like get into the show and maybe you have a chance to win. And I think that works probably better in baseball than it does in the NFL, where, the short series are the great equalizers. And, if even if this year's Pirates had gotten into the playoffs as the last seed, they probably have a 10% chance to win the World Series, right? And that seems to be what the plan is, because I don't see a 2013 to 2015 window coming together here, Paul.
No, neither do I. And that's the problem. The other part of it is, if they don't do something to really bolster their starting pitching, they are going to go actually have a year where they sort of regress, aren't they?
I think it's possible. Yeah.
So, to me, and this is, as I wrote in that column, this is year 5. There can be no longer, we're rebuilding, or we're doing this, or we're really excited because we turned, Aroldis Chapman into a few prospects at the trade deadline. None of that stuff works right now. None of it, you know what I mean? You got to win this year, period.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of teams that got to win, Paul, the Penguins have to and are not. Out in Vegas, disastrous third period over the weekend. They lose after having a 2-0 lead. Then they go to Arizona and have one of the worst plays I think I've ever seen in Pittsburgh sports history. I just happened to be gazing up. The fiance and I were watching One Tree Hill lazily, and I wasn't super focused on the game, but I just gazed up at my other TV, and I saw Chris Letang put it in his own net. I said, that's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And just wasn't expecting to look up and see that. It's right up there with the Javi Baez play for the Pirates, where they ran. Who was the first baseman that ran Javi Baez back toward the plate?
Yeah. Oh, I can't think of it right now. And everybody got all upset. Will Craig, and everybody got all upset because we ripped them. Right, for that. But yeah, the Penguins, here's the thing, Adam. We've been saying the Penguins story has not changed for 3 or 4 years. If they are not right now understanding that it is over, they are not winning anything with this group. Okay, it's over. That window is closed. I get it that you stretched it as many years as you could stretch it. But at the end of the day, when it's over, it's over. And they're trying to make something happen that is just not going to happen. And I think that's the thing that's probably the most frustrating about all of this, is that we've watched it now for how long?
Yeah, so, I think Mike Sullivan belongs in the same. What have you his most recent playoff win is closer to Mike Tomlin's most recent playoff win than it is to the present. And I'm going to ask the question like this, Paul. I think you could still make a team centered around Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, and Erik Karlsson work. I think they've got enough juice left in them that you could be doing better than this. But everyone else, there's a lot of guys beyond those 4 that seem like they're on scholarship, A, and B, I think that Mike Sullivan seems like he's at the top of that list in terms of there's no accountability to change the way that this team plays based on the personnel that it has, rather than what worked going on, 6 years ago, 8 years ago now. You know what I mean? When you go win the Stanley Cup, great, it was a great template. You don't have those players anymore, but you're still trying to play the same way. The same style when you just don't have the speed and the skill down the lineup. Doesn't someone have to be accountable for that at some point, Paul? Whether it's because I've heard the theory is that Sid and Gino and them, they don't want to play the way that they have to play now with the team that they have. They want to play the way they've always played. There not need to be a come to Jesus moment for the coaching staff, the players, everybody saying this isn't working and we're not going to make the playoffs again unless something changes.
Right. You're absolutely right, Adam. And there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. You're absolutely right. And so to me, I feel like when we sit here and talk about it, it's frustrating because it's the same discussion over and over and over and over again. If the players, the players have always, this group of players have always pretty much had control and dictated things and gotten what they wanted, and they've been not always easy to coach. That there's, they basically ran Mike Therrien out of the room, right? Dan Bylsma, they basically, convinced him to continue to try and play a style that clearly after a couple of years was not working anymore. The bottom line here is they have to make changes. And I think that you're right that you could win with those guys, a team built around those guys. But by the same token, I think you're better off if you say we're going to keep Sidney Crosby around and we're going to try and move on from the other three. Crosby is still going to be the guy we're built around, right? But we're going to try and turn these other guys into something younger, faster, whatever, and also more controllable and more coachable. And then we're going to go from there. But to me, what they're doing, I guarantee you they'll probably be in the playoff hunt, because that's just the way things go. Okay, you're in the playoff hunt, maybe even make the playoffs, but the ceiling for this team is not very high.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Paul. It's still hard for me to talk myself into blow everything up, and that they actually could pull off trading those guys off and getting the talent in here to win on a timetable of whatever Sidney Crosby has left. I think it's going to end up being a full rebuild job, and I think that's the problem, Paul, is that some people want to try to have it both ways. Keep Sid, keep winning, get rid of the pieces that aren't working. I don't know if I agree that that's super possible, but we will see how things go going into the NHL trade deadline. I think Jake Gensel is going to be a real bellwether of how things are going to go over the next year. Paul, real quickly to wrap up.
They need to trade him, though. Gensel. I think they need to.
But if they really are going to keep committing to trying to make the playoffs and go down to the last game, I think he's a guy you need to keep, right? And I think it's trading him would be swallowing pride and saying we're not going to try to win this year. I think. Right.
Well, I think that aren't they very close to that at some point?
I agree. I just don't know if they're capable of saying. And look, granted, I think Sidney Crosby would be the person who's most upset by this. Are you going to go to Sidney Crosby and say we're getting rid of your best winger and just figure it out? I mean, I think that's why he's going to be a bellwether of whether they're going to seriously consider shaking this thing up, or if he stays, I think that we're going to see a lot more of the status quo. I think he's kind of like the tea leaf that I'm trying to read.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but I won't be surprised if they trade him. I won't. I know what they're saying. I know but I won't be surprised if they trade him because he's a commodity you have that you could trade and actually get something for. So we'll see. But again, it seems like it's been the same discussion for at least 3 years.
Yes, and we will keep having it here on this show. Paul, I'm going to get you out of here with some college hoops. Pitt, Penn State, West Virginia all get big upsets in the past week. Penn State beats Wisconsin at the Bryce Jordan Center. Pitt goes down, beats Duke in Cameron Indoor for the first time since 1979. And West Virginia beats Kansas. Paul, which of those three do you have the most hope for going down the stretch here? I think they're all in somewhat dire situations, but, who do you think has the best chance at a late season turnaround?
Pitt. And the reason I say Pitt is because they're a team that they're built around some young players that have talent. They have some guys that can actually shoot the ball. They struggled shooting the ball for a month, but they actually have some guys that can score. I feel like the other part of it is the Big 12 and the Big 10 probably in the middle are a little bit more rugged than the ACC. And so I think that if you look at what's ahead of Pitt now and the schedule-wise, their next game is at Florida State or something, or at Wake Forest maybe, or I don't even know, somewhere. They're on the road again one more time. But after that, man, you look at their schedule, they should be able to take, a real good run at like 11, 12 ACC wins. Whereas I think it's rugged in the Big 12, and I think it's rugged in the Big 10 for both Penn State and West Virginia. So I would say Pitt.
Yeah, and Pitt seems to have some, the swagger with which they went into Cameron Indoor and Blake Hinson taunting the fans pretty much the whole game. I mean, I remember people remember him standing up on the table at the end. I was watching him in the first half, and he was kind of pointing at the crowd and doing his thing. I was like, man, this guy came to play. I sense a little bit more overall confidence with that team than I do with the other two.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about it. They have a way about them where they really do. They do like to feel themselves when it's rolling, and that can be contagious. But for me, it comes down to two things. One, again, I think they've got some younger guys that are getting better and better. And two, I think the ACC for lack of a better way of saying it, stinks. And so you got North Carolina, who I think they've already played all the games against North Carolina that they're going to play this year. And Duke, who they beat. They split 1-1. Who else is good in that league? That you say, oh, well, Pitt can't beat them. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some random games. Pitt will probably lose at NC State or, at Florida State or some of those random games like that. But for the most part, who is it that's in this league that you say, wow, Pitt can't beat them? I don't think there's anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they're going to have to win almost every game, Paul, and they can't afford any more screw ups. And I think that's the difficult part is you really are talking about a run the table or close to run the table situation, to get yourself into a position where if you win 1 or 2 games in the ACC tournament, you're probably good. I think their margin for error is gone, but I do think that there is still a path. So we will see how that unfolds. Paul, any final thoughts on Pittsburgh sports before we wrap up for the week here?
No, we covered a lot of ground here. We did absolutely covered a lot of ground here. So we will continue to do it and watch what goes on. Of course, I probably would be remiss if I didn't say that I like the Ravens to play against the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And I actually think both teams will cover as well this week. So that's my picks.
So you're a believer, Paul, in the TikTok theory that the Super Bowl logo portends which teams are going to end up there, because that's the conspiracy theory's pick.
No, I think the best teams are going to end up there is what it comes down to. And I think the 49ers, I know that people are for whatever reason down on Brock Purdy, but the 49ers to me and the Ravens are the two most complete and two best teams. I think they will both win this weekend, and we will have a 49ers-Ravens Super Bowl.
I think that'd be good TV. I think I'm still going to pick the Chiefs because I'll believe someone other than Tom Brady will take out Patrick Mahomes when I see it. He was incredible this past week, but can't complain about that pick either, Paul. The Ravens have been great, and they certainly are deserving. We're going to leave it there. If there is a Steelers offensive coordinator coaching hire by the end of the week, Christopher Carter will cover it Friday on the North Shore Drive podcast. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm, and we will talk to you again next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.